All right. Well, look, great to be with everybody. We're thinking about Louisiana every day where we're up here at the Supreme Court. We'll have the oral argument tomorrow. It starts at 9 o'clock Eastern. It will be a presentation to try to finally decide how to do congressional districting, both in the state of Louisiana and in the United States. We've had a real interesting switcheroo, if you will, on the who's supporting this and who's not. Unfortunately, the governor and the attorney general were in favor of this district instead of defending the original district that had been enacted in 2022. They decided that they might lose, so they never mounted a defense. There's been some statements made that the state was ordered by the district judge to enact a new districting plan, and that order does not exist. The only order that the local district judge issued to the state in the litigation about whether or not the original 2022 districts were legal was an order that said, please come to court and defend your district on like March 4, 2024, and they chose not to defend the state's original redistricting plan and instead proposed this racial gerrymander that the district court found was unconstitutional. And so there was no order. We instead surrendered and decided to do what was being suggested might need to be done. It's ironic because back in 1993 when we first did what they called the Hayes case, but that was where we set aside the first congressional districts that were unconstitutional in the 90s. That was the first case on the merits of a racial gerrymander in the United States, and we won it in Louisiana. But what was interesting was the court held, among other things in the 90s, that the state cannot use as an excuse the argument that, well, a federal Department of Justice official or a federal judge can't make you do something that's unconstitutional and thereby give the state constitutional protection. And that's where we are 30 years later. Again, we are looking at a state officials who decided they would rather switch than fight, and it seems ironic that happened 18 months ago, and now on the eve of oral argument, the state switched again, and so now they've come back around to defend the bad district as opposed to staying strong and defending the original congressional districts. So we'll find out tomorrow with the Supreme Court. We'll make oral argument. For many lawyers, oral argument, presentation of your case at the U.S. Supreme Court is sort of our Super Bowl. You'll let me enjoy the personal part of this. But what's ironic is at least at the Super Bowl, when it's over, you know who won. With oral argument at the U.S. Supreme Court, it's the Super Bowl. We're all there. We're proud to be there and defend Louisiana voters. But we're not going to find out for several months who won. And then I think the Secretary of State has done one thing that's very good for our state, and that is in her brief, particularly, it points out our election calendar and informs the Supreme Court in good detail that we do need a decision from the U.S. Supreme Court by late November, 1st of December. And then if we're successful and we throw out this district, the state has time either in the legislature or at the court to draw a district that is constitutional and will again look very similar to what we began with. And so we're looking forward to the argument tomorrow. We're looking forward to a successful voiding of this crazy district that goes from South Baton Rouge It goes, let's see, 100 miles up to Alexandria, then 120 more up to Shreveport, and the only defensive district that's being presented by the appellants is that if they don't do it that way, they want to do from Baton Rouge 100 miles up to Alex, and then they want to go 120 miles up to Monroe. But either way, they're all, I believe, under the Constitution, they're all racial gerrymanders. They're not valid districts, and golly, if we have to do it again, we'll do it again. But at some point, what we want are compact traditional districts so that the voters have the best opportunity to know the candidates, to know their fellow voters, to have whole school boards, to have whole police juries, all within a congressional district, so that interrelated culture, social contacts, and political organization, all of them can be positive impacts on our congressional candidates and ultimately our congressional representation. That's the best way to get self-governance and self-representation, is not to let these districts destroy our own social and cultural connections to one another. We all live together, we're all going to vote together, we're all going to elect a representative, and we're going to pay real attention to what that representative does together to make sure we get good representation back in this Washington, D.C. town. So that's really, it is important, and it's really, to me, the reason I'm involved is that the better we do on making compact districts that are non-racial, the better chance we have for the voters to impact their representation.
Let me ask you, Paul, if I could ask you a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us a little bit about why racial gerrymandering flies in the face of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment? And could you also talk a little bit about Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and why it's in question right now?
Well, it's the Equal Protection Clause says that nobody will be denied any of their freedoms are treated differently based upon race. And functionally, it was what we call one of the civil rights amendments. You've got the 13th, the 14th is the Equal Protection Clause, and the 15th Amendment is the amendment that says no one shall have their right to vote denied or abridged based upon race or previous condition of servitude. Obviously, both of them meant to explicitly eliminate any barriers to your voting regardless of race. Section 2 is an attempt to make sure that those constitutional protections are maintained and are trying on a group basis, and that's where this thing conflicts with equal protection. Equal protection says you shall be treated as an individual, not classified by race. And so if it says you can't be classified as a group by race, then how can we have group representation or group remedies? And that's really the issue at the Supreme Court today. And so regardless of how you get there, the Supreme Court has been moving toward what they call, as far as governmental action, a colorblind standard that says, state, we had a civil war. We decided that we are not going to treat people different because of race. And we've put 3 amendments into the Constitution that says that. Now, you can redistrict, you can manage elections, but you can't do it with race. And so that is a simple, logical methodology. State is sovereign, state has the right to create the elections. They do not have the right to deny or abridge voting rights based upon race. Part of the interesting part, or the difficult part about Section 2, is its result often is that they create intentionally districts that are exaggerated white districts and exaggerated black districts. And so what we've started doing, or the effect of this Section 2, is that you end up literally allocating political representation proportionately based upon race. In other words, we're going to have so many white representatives and so many black representatives. The Supreme Court is going to consider tomorrow how that can be rectified or accepted under the Equal Protection Clause that says we're not going to grant rights based upon the race of the people. And particularly what happens is in the white districts, those minorities that are left in the white districts have been structurally isolated, but in the black districts, the white voters have been structurally isolated. So again, if you're the unfavored race in either of those districts, your rights under the Equal Protection Clause and probably under the 15th Amendment have been violated, because if you're the unfavored race, your right to influence the election has been intentionally thwarted because of your race. So that's sort of how we've got to where we are. Quite frankly, Section 2 is not, I'm going to say it this way, it's not as bad as you and I think it is, because it's been poorly applied. It's not that Section 2 might not have a way to survive, but the problem is that the way it's been used as an excuse to allocate political power by race. And so that's what we're arguing about. That's what we're going to discuss with the Supreme Court tomorrow.